I never thought my 59th birthday would end with my only daughter looking me in the eyes and saying, "I hope you die before 60, Dad." Not a joke, not a slip of the tongue. She meant every word, her voice dripping with a hatred I never knew she carried. That night, with my faithful dog Benny as my only companion, I changed my life insurance beneficiary from my daughter to him. A symbolic gesture, I thought. Until I found her letter hidden in my sock drawer, written 3 years ago, addressed to me with the chilling words, "For when you die," on the envelope. What terrible secret could turn a daughter against her father? What lies had my brother been feeding her all these years? And what was in the medical records my late wife tried to show me the night she died? The night of the accident that suddenly doesn't feel like an accident at all? Some family secrets are buried so deep that digging them up might destroy everyone involved. But sometimes the truth is the only gift we have left to give. Follow this channel for more stories that will break your heart and heal it again. Like and comment with where you're watching from. And let me know if you've ever had to choose between a painful truth and a comfortable lie. I'd just blown out the candles on my 59th birthday cake. 59 years on this earth, and there I was. A foolish old man with the childish hope that my daughter might say those 3 words I hadn't heard in years. "I love you, Dad." The dining room of my modest suburban home in Massachusetts was decorated with half-hearted streamers, my attempt to create some semblance of celebration. Rebecca, my only daughter, sat across from me, scrolling through her phone. Her husband had made some excuse about a work emergency. My son-in-law never could look me in the eye for more than a few seconds. I'd stopped expecting him to show up years ago. "Make a wish, Dad," Rebecca said, not looking up from her screen. I closed my eyes and wished for what I always wished for, that things could go back to how they were before Martha died. Before the silence that grew between my daughter and me like some living thing, feeding on unsaid words and buried grief. When I opened my eyes, Rebecca was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Contempt? Pity? Something darker? "So, what did you wish for?" she asked, setting her phone down. "Can't tell you or it won't come true," I replied, trying to sound playful like the father I used to be. "That's the rule, isn't it?" "Rules," she scoffed. "Always about the rules with you." I ignored the jab and cut into the small chocolate cake I'd bought from the grocery store. Martha would have baked something from scratch. She would have filled this room with warmth and laughter. God, I missed her. "Want a piece?" I offered. Rebecca shook her head. "I'm not hungry." I slid a slice onto my plate anyway. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band pulled too tight. Outside, through the kitchen window, I could see my neighbor Carl washing his car. His grandkids were visiting, running through sprinklers in the yard. I'd known Carl for 20 years. We'd once been close before I withdrew from everyone after Martha's death. "You know," Rebecca said suddenly, "I've been thinking about your retirement." "Oh?" I set my fork down. This was the most she'd willingly talked to me in months. "Yeah, about what happens next for you." For a moment, something like hope flickered in my chest. Was this an olive branch? Was she finally ready to repair what was broken between us? "I hope you die before 60. The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I hope you don't make it to 60, Dad. It would be better for everyone." I searched her face for any sign that this was some twisted joke, but found none. My daughter, my only child, had just wished death upon me on my birthday, and she wasn't laughing. This wasn't a joke. It was like she was spitting out something toxic she'd been holding inside for years. "Rebecca, Don't," she cut me off. "Just don't, okay? I sang the stupid song, I watched you blow out your candles. My obligation is fulfilled." She stood up, grabbing her purse. "I need to go." "You just got here," I said weakly. "And now I'm leaving." She headed for the door without looking back. "At least tell me why," I called after her. "What did I do that was so terrible?" She paused at the door, her back to me. For a second, I thought she might turn around. Instead, she said, "You know exactly what you did," and slammed the door behind her. Benny, my aging golden retriever with his white muzzle and sad eyes, padded into the room at the sound. He rested his head on my knee, looking up at me with more love than my own daughter had shown. I scratched behind his ears, grateful for his simple, unconditional affection. That night, I sat alone in my recliner, the one Martha used to tease me about, calling it my command center. Benny dozed in my lap, his warm weight a comfort against the chill that had settled in my bones. On the coffee table sat the remnants of my birthday, a cold, half-eaten pizza I'd ordered after Rebecca left, the TV remote I couldn't bring myself to use, and a silence that hurt worse than any words. I didn't argue with her earlier. I didn't cry. But now, in the quiet of my empty house, with only Benny's soft snores for company, I let the tears come, not just for today, but for all the days that had led to this moment, for Martha, for the family we once were, for whatever I'd done that my daughter couldn't forgive. The next morning, I made a decision. I logged onto my bank's website and navigated to my life insurance policy. With steady hands, I removed Rebecca's name as beneficiary and replaced it with Benny Harrington, my old companion with white paws and sad eyes, who had never once wished me dead. I thought it would just be a symbolic gesture, something private that would never matter to anyone but me. But life has a way of exposing our most secret acts. Later that day, I was searching for a pair of socks in my dresser drawer, the same drawer where Martha used to hide love notes for me to find, when I discovered something that shouldn't have been there. A letter, written by my daughter, addressed to me, dated 3 years ago, and the words on the envelope made my blood run cold. For when you die. With trembling fingers, I opened it, unaware that what I was about to read would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family, my brother, and the night I lost Martha forever. My hands were trembling before I even opened the envelope. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed Martha and I had shared for 32 years. The springs creaked beneath me, a familiar sound that used to comfort me but now only emphasized how alone I was. Outside, a late autumn rain had started, pattering against the windows like impatient fingers. The envelope was yellowed slightly at the edges, not from age but from being hidden. The handwriting was unmistakably Rebecca's, but different somehow. More jagged, less controlled, as if written in a moment of rage or despair. I turned it over in my hand several times, almost afraid of what I'd find inside. For when you die, it said, not after you're gone, or in the event of your passing. The bluntness of it struck me like a physical blow. I slid my thumb under the flap and tore it open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded in thirds. Rebecca's handwriting covered the page, tremulous lines that looked like they'd been written through tears or fury. Dad, it began without dear or any other softening prefix. If you're reading this, you're dead, and I hope it hurt. I hope in your final moments you thought about what you did. I hope you died knowing that I know the truth. My chest tightened. What truth? What could I possibly have done to deserve this level of hatred? I'm sorry for something, but not what you might think. The letter continued. I'm sorry I couldn't say this to your face. I've been a coward. But now that you're gone, I can finally admit that I hate you for what you never admitted. I hate you for the lie you've lived. I hate you for what you did to Mom. I had to stop reading for a moment. My vision blurred with tears. Benny pushed his wet nose against my hand, sensing my distress. I scratched behind his ears automatically, grateful for the warmth of another living being. I know it was your fault, the letter went on. Mom died because of you. I've always known, somewhere deep down, but I didn't want to believe it, but now I know for sure. The truth came out, Dad. The truth always does. I saw Martha in the passenger seat of our car that night, the last time I saw her alive. The wet road, the screeching brakes, her scream. But I never told Rebecca about that night. Never. How could she know? Or worse, who had made her believe this? You could have saved her. You chose not to take her to the hospital. You let her die. The room seemed to spin around me. This wasn't true. It wasn't how it happened at all. Martha had chest pains that night. Yes. I begged her to go to the hospital, but she insisted it was just anxiety. She'd been having panic attacks ever since her mother's death 3 months earlier. I believed her. God help me, I believed her. We were driving home from dinner when she clutched her chest again. This time it was different. I could see it in her eyes. I made a U-turn, tires squealing on the wet pavement. Hospital, I said. No arguments. She nodded, her face pale and sweaty. We never made it. A truck ran a red light. The impact was on her side of the car, but Rebecca didn't know any of this. She was away at college when it happened. I spared her the details, telling her only that her mother had died in a car accident. I couldn't bear to share the guilt I carried, that if I'd insisted on the hospital earlier, Martha might still be alive. So who had told her this twisted version of events? And why? As I read on, My heart turned to ice. He told me everything, Dad. Uncle Henry told me what really happened that night. How Mom begged you to take her to the doctor. How you dismissed her pain as just anxiety. How you waited until it was too late. Henry, my younger brother. The same man who had distanced himself from our family after Martha's funeral. The same person who, without my permission, had taken care of Rebecca for a few days when she was small, while I was hospitalized for pneumonia. The same man who had walked away, with secrets. I'll never forgive you, and I hope wherever you are now that you're suffering like she suffered, like I've suffered, living with a father who killed my mother through his own selfishness and neglect. The letter was dated 3 years ago. 3 years she'd been carrying this poison inside her. 3 years of believing I was responsible for her mother's death. No wonder she wished me dead. But why hadn't she given me this letter? Why hide it in my sock drawer instead? Had some small part of her doubted Henry's story? Had she wanted to confront me but couldn't bring herself to do it? My mind whirled with memories of the past 3 years, how she'd grown increasingly distant, how her visits became shorter and less frequent, how she'd flinch if I tried to hug her. All those little rejections now made terrible sense. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me, grief giving way to determination. There were questions that needed answers, and for the first time in years I had a purpose beyond merely existing. As I set the letter on my nightstand, something else nagged at my memory, something about Martha's visits to a doctor I didn't know about. Something about papers I'd found after her death but had been too devastated to examine closely. I needed to find those papers. I needed to understand what had really happened. And most of all, I needed to know why my own brother would poison my daughter against me with such a terrible lie. Tomorrow I would begin searching. But tonight, with the rain drumming against the roof and Benny snoring softly at my feet, I allowed myself to weep for everything I'd lost, and everything I might yet lose if I couldn't uncover the truth. Morning came with a slant of harsh October sunlight cutting across my bedroom floor. I hadn't slept more than a couple of hours. Rebecca's letter lay on my nightstand where I'd placed it, its presence almost palpable in the quiet room. Benny was curled at the foot of my bed, his rhythmic breathing the only sound besides the occasional car passing outside. I pushed myself up, joints protesting with familiar aches. The mirror above my dresser reflected a man I barely recognized anymore. Thin face, hollow eyes, hair more silver than brown. When did I get so old? Martha would hardly know me now. Martha. Her name still caught in my throat like a fishbone. I showered and dressed mechanically, my mind focused on a single purpose, finding evidence that would counter Henry's poisonous narrative. The garage was where I kept most of our old belongings, things I couldn't bear to look at but couldn't bring myself to throw away either. The garage door creaked as I pulled it open. The space was cluttered with cardboard boxes stacked along the walls, each labeled in my precise handwriting. Christmas decorations, Martha's books, Rebecca's school projects. A thin layer of dust covered everything. How long had it been since I'd ventured out here? A year? More? I moved toward the far corner where I kept the most precious items, the ones too painful to keep in the house but too valuable to discard. 5 boxes labeled simply, Martha. I started with the one marked documents. Inside were folders containing our marriage certificate, old tax returns, insurance policies. Beneath these was a manila envelope labeled medical. My hands trembled as I opened it. Martha had always been healthy. Aside from regular checkups and the occasional cold, she rarely saw doctors. But in this folder were records I'd never examined closely after her death. Appointments, test results, prescriptions. I spread them on the concrete floor, sitting cross-legged like a child doing homework. One document immediately caught my eye. A prescription made out to Martha, signed by a Dr. Lawrence Wexler, dated the day before the accident. I'd never heard Martha mention this doctor. The prescription was for a medication I didn't recognize, but what struck me cold was the address at the top of the prescription pad, Oak Ridge Medical Center. That was in Millfield, the small town where Henry had lived for the past 15 years. Why would Martha see a doctor in Millfield 40 minutes away, when we had perfectly good doctors in our own town? And why wouldn't she tell me about it? I dug deeper, finding 2 more appointments with this Dr. Wexler in the months leading up to her death. What was going on? Had Martha been sick? Was this somehow connected to Henry's claim that I'd ignored her symptoms? As I stared at the documents spread before me, One name kept pulling at my attention. Henry, my younger brother by 3 years. The boy who'd always lived in my shadow growing up. The man who'd been closer to Martha than any of my other siblings. Henry, who distanced himself after Martha's death, barely attending the funeral, avoiding family gatherings. I'd attributed his behavior to grief. He and Martha had been close, after all. But what if there was more to it? I gathered the papers and went back inside, spreading them on the kitchen table. The prescription bothered me most. Why would Martha hide medical appointments from me? We told each other everything, or at least I thought we did. I reread Rebecca's letter, focusing on the part about Henry. Uncle Henry told me what really happened that night. How would Henry know what happened? He wasn't there. Unless Martha had been confiding in him about something she kept from me. The thought sent a chill through me. What secrets had my wife and brother shared? I picked up my phone and dialed Rebecca's number before I could think better of it. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I wasn't surprised. After yesterday, she probably never wanted to speak to me again. "Rebecca, it's Dad," I said after the beep. "I need to talk to you about Uncle Henry. It's important. Please call me back." I doubted she would, but I had to try. Next, I tried looking up Henry online. We hadn't spoken in years, but last I heard he was still in Millfield. A quick search confirmed it. Henry Harrington, 57, Millfield, Massachusetts. There was an address listed for a rental property. I found myself reaching for my car keys before I'd made a conscious decision. I needed answers, and Henry had them. The drive to Millfield would take about 40 minutes, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt a fire burning inside me, a desperate need to understand what had happened to my family. I filled Benny's water and food bowls, patted his head, and told him I'd be back soon. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught sight of my neighbor Carl watching from his front porch. He raised a hand in greeting, but I barely acknowledged him. My mind was already in Millfield, confronting the brother who had turned my daughter against me. The drive gave me too much time to think. Memories of Henry and Martha together flashed through my mind. The way they'd laugh at private jokes, how they'd take walks together when he visited, their hushed conversations that would stop when I entered a room. Had I been blind to something obvious? Had there been more between them than familial affection? No, I couldn't let my mind go there. Martha loved me. Whatever secrets she kept, whatever reason she had for seeing a doctor in Henry's town, there had to be an explanation that didn't destroy everything I believed about our marriage. Millfield hadn't changed much since I'd last visited. Still the same quaint New England town with its white-steepled church and town square lined with century-old elms. Henry's address led me to a small rental house on a quiet street a few blocks from the center of town. I parked across the street, my heart hammering in my chest. What would I say to him after all these years? How would I even begin to ask about his lies to Rebecca? As I approached the front door, I noticed how run down the place looked. Peeling paint, overgrown lawn, newspapers piled on the porch. I rang the bell and waited, listening for movement inside. Nothing. I knocked, harder this time. Still nothing. I was about to turn away when the door of the neighboring house opened. An elderly woman peered out cautiously. "You looking for Henry?" she called. I nodded. "I'm his brother. Haven't seen him in a couple days." She stepped onto her porch, tightening her cardigan around her thin shoulders. "He works nights at the hospital. Maintenance staff. Might catch him there." The hospital. Oak Ridge Medical Center, where Martha had gone to see Dr. Wexler. The connection made my skin crawl. "Thank you," I said, already heading back to my car. I had a new destination now, and hopefully, answers waiting at the end of this journey that had begun with a birthday wish for my death. Oak Ridge Medical Center loomed before me, a sprawling complex of beige brick and tinted windows. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as I pulled in, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I hadn't slept properly in days, and exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. The main entrance was bustling with the usual hospital traffic, nurses changing shifts, visitors with flowers and balloons, patients being wheeled out to waiting cars. I stood in the middle of it all, suddenly uncertain. What was I doing here? What did I expect to find? At the information desk, a young woman with kind eyes looked up from her computer. Her name tag read, "Melissa." "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice carrying that practiced hospital compassion. "I'm looking for my brother," I said. "Henry Harrington. I was told he works in maintenance here." She typed something into her computer, then frowned slightly. Yes, he's on staff, but he won't be in until 11 tonight. Night shift. I checked my watch. Nearly 5 hours to wait. Is there a Dr. Wexler here? Lawrence Wexler? Another search. Another frown. Dr. Wexler retired about 3 years ago. Is there something specific I could help you with? 3 years ago. Right after Martha died. The timing couldn't be coincidental. No, thank you, I said, already turning away. I'll come back tonight. I couldn't wait 5 hours doing nothing. Instead, I found myself wandering the hospital corridors, as if Martha's ghost might appear around any corner. The sterile hallways, the antiseptic smell, the hushed voices, it all reminded me of the night I lost her. The emergency room doctor's face as he told me she hadn't made it. The cold plastic chair I collapsed into. The sound of my own breathing too loud in my ears. I ended up in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like dishwater. My mind wouldn't stop spinning, creating scenarios, each more painful than the last. What if Martha had been seriously ill and hadn't told me? What if she and Henry? No, I couldn't let myself go there. Not yet. Not without proof. As I sat there, I noticed an older gentleman in scrubs at the next table, his badge identifying him as Dr. Harold Kim, cardiology. Something compelled me to approach him. "Excuse me, doctor," I said. "Did you happen to know Dr. Lawrence Wexler? He used to work here." Dr. Kim looked up, surprised. "Larry? Sure, I knew him well. Brilliant diagnostician. Retired to Florida a few years back." He studied my face. "Were you a patient of his?" "My wife was," I said, my voice catching. "Martha Harrington." A flicker of recognition crossed his face, then quickly disappeared. Or had I imagined it? "I'm sorry, I don't recall the name. I saw thousands of patients over the years." "She died 3 years ago," I pressed. "The day after her last appointment with Dr. Wexler." Dr. Kim's expression changed subtly. He glanced around the cafeteria, then back at me. "Look, I really shouldn't," he sighed. "Why don't you sit down?" I took the seat across from him, heart pounding. "I remember your wife's case," he said quietly. "It was unusual. I wasn't her doctor, but I consulted briefly. Larry was very troubled by what happened." "What do you mean? What happened?" He hesitated. "Patient confidentiality still applies, Mr. Harrington, even after death. But I will say this. Your wife's situation was complicated. She made certain requests about her care that were unconventional." "What requests?" My voice had risen, drawing glances from nearby tables. I lowered it again. "Please, I need to know." "She asked that certain information be kept from her family, from you specifically." He looked uncomfortable. "That's all I can say. If you want to know more, you'd need to request her medical records formally, as next of kin." "But you consulted on her case," I persisted. "Was she seriously ill? Was it her heart?" Dr. Kim stood up, gathering his tray. "I've already said more than I should. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Harrington. Truly, I am. But I can't help you further." He walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. Martha had deliberately kept her medical condition from me. Why? What was she hiding? And how did Henry fit into all this? I couldn't wait until 11 p.m. to confront my brother. There had to be another way to find him. I approached the information desk again, where Melissa was now chatting with a security guard. "Excuse me," I interrupted. "About my brother, Henry Harrington. Does the hospital have contact information for him? A phone number, perhaps?" Melissa shook her head. "I can't give out employee personal information. Hospital policy." The security guard, a heavy-set man with a salt and pepper mustache, gave me a curious look. "Henry Harrington? Maintenance guy about yay high?" He held his hand at shoulder level. "Lives over on Maple Street?" "That's him," I confirmed. "If you're looking for him this time of day, try Donovan's, that bar down the street. He's usually there before his shift." I thanked them and hurried out. Donovan's was a dive bar about 2 blocks from the hospital. The kind of place with neon beer signs in the windows and a perpetual haze of cigarette smoke, despite state laws against indoor smoking. The interior was dark and smelled of stale beer and desperation. A few patrons hunched over their drinks at the bar, while a baseball game played silently on a TV mounted in the corner. And there, at the far end of the bar, sat Henry. He'd aged poorly in the years since I'd seen him last. His face was gaunt, with deep lines around his mouth and eyes. His once thick brown hair had thinned considerably, and what remained was streaked with gray. He nursed a glass of amber liquid, staring into it as if it held answers to questions I didn't even know to ask. For a moment I just watched him, this stranger who was my brother, the boy who'd followed me everywhere when we were kids, the teenager who'd resented living in my shadow, the man who'd poisoned my daughter against me with lies. I approached him slowly, sliding onto the bar stool beside him. He didn't look up. "Hello, Henry," I said quietly. His head snapped up, eyes widening in recognition, and something else. Fear. He recovered quickly, his expression hardening into a mask of contempt. Well, look what the cat dragged in." His voice was rougher than I remembered, scraped raw by years of cigarettes and whiskey. "To what do I owe the pleasure, big brother?" "We need to talk about what you told Rebecca," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger boiling inside me. "About Martha, about the night she died." He took a long sip of his drink, then set the glass down deliberately. "She never told you, did she?" A smile spread across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your perfect wife, your perfect marriage, all built on lies. What are you talking about?" He leaned closer, his breath sour with alcohol. "She never told you she was going to leave you, did she? That she'd already packed a bag? That she was coming to me that night?" The room seemed to tilt around me. "You're lying." "Am I?" His smile widened. "She never got the chance to tell you the truth, but I told Rebecca. She deserved to know what kind of man her father really is." "And what kind is that?" My voice was barely audible over the blood rushing in my ears. Henry's eyes bored into mine, filled with decades of resentment, the kind who was so blind to his wife's unhappiness that she had to sneak around behind his back, the kind who was so self-absorbed he didn't notice she was planning to leave, the kind who had a chance to save her that night but was too stubborn, too proud to listen when she said she needed a doctor. I stood up abruptly, my stool scraping loudly against the floor. "You had no right to tell Rebecca those lies. You've poisoned her against me based on, what? Your own twisted fantasy?" "She wasn't coming to see me," Henry said, his voice dripping with venom. "She was coming to be with me. There's a difference." The implication hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back a step, nearly colliding with a waitress carrying a tray of drinks. I'm saying you don't know everything about your wife, big brother, and you never will." He drained his glass and stood up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get to work. Unlike some people, I can't afford to retire early." He brushed past me, heading for the door. I watched him go, frozen in place, my entire understanding of my marriage, my life, crumbling around me. I couldn't drive home that night. Henry's words had shattered something fundamental inside me, leaving me unfit to operate heavy machinery. Instead, I checked into a dreary motel on the outskirts of Millfield, the kind of place where the desk clerk doesn't make eye contact and the sheets smell faintly of industrial bleach. Room 17 became my confessional booth that night. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, head in my hands, and allowed myself to do something I hadn't done since Martha's funeral. I wept without restraint, not quiet tears of dignity but raw, guttural sobs that tore through my chest like physical pain. Was it possible? Could Martha really have been planning to leave me for Henry? My brother, of all people? The thought was like acid in my veins. When the storm of emotion finally passed, I lay back on the bed, staring at water stains on the ceiling that resembled continents on some alien map. I forced myself to revisit that night, the last night of Martha's life, searching for clues I might have missed. It had been a Thursday in October, much like today. Martha had been quieter than usual at dinner, picking at her food. When I asked what was wrong, she said she was just tired. We'd driven home in silence, the radio playing softly between us. Then, about 10 minutes from home, she'd clutched her chest, her face contorting in pain. "Martha?" I'd reached for her hand. "What is it?" "Nothing," she'd gasped. "Just anxiety. You know I've been having those panic attacks since Mom died." But I knew this was different. Her face was pale, sweaty, her breathing shallow and rapid. "We're going to the hospital," I'd said firmly, making a U-turn. "No, please," she'd protested weakly. "Just take me home, I'll be fine." But I insisted. For once, I didn't listen to her. We were halfway to the hospital when it happened. The truck running the red light, the impact on Martha's side of the car, the screech of metal, the shattering glass. After that, just fragments of memory. Paramedics, sirens, a doctor's grim face, the word deceased hanging in the air like a death sentence of its own. Had she really been planning to leave me that night? Had she packed a bag, as Henry claimed? I hadn't noticed one in the car, but then again, I'd been focused on her pain, on getting her help. I sat up abruptly. The prescription from Dr. Wexler. What had it been for? I hadn't recognized the medication name at the time, but now I pulled out my phone and searched for it. Propranolol, a beta blocker commonly prescribed for heart conditions, but also sometimes used for anxiety. So maybe she had been telling the truth about the panic attacks. But why see a doctor in Millfield instead of our own physician? Why keep it secret? Unless she'd been seeing the doctor as an excuse to visit Henry. The thought made me physically ill. I needed more information. I needed to see her full medical records. As her husband, I had the legal right. I should have requested them years ago, but in my grief, I'd let so many details slide. Despite the late hour, I opened my laptop and emailed our family lawyer, requesting he help me obtain Martha's complete medical records from Oak Ridge Medical Center. Then I did something I'd been avoiding for years. I opened the folder on my laptop labeled simply M. Inside were dozens of photos of Martha. Martha laughing at our wedding. Martha holding newborn Rebecca. Martha in the garden she'd loved so much. Martha on our last anniversary, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Had she been unhappy? Had I been so blind to her suffering? I clicked through the photos, searching for signs I might have missed. In one, taken at a family barbecue about a month before she died, I noticed something in the background. Henry, watching Martha from across the yard, his expression unreadable. I zoomed in, studying his face. Was that longing in his eyes? Or was I seeing what I now feared had been there all along? I closed the laptop, unable to bear any more painful scrutiny of the past. Instead, I reached for my phone, and on impulse, checked the voice messages from years ago that I'd never had the heart to delete. There it was, Martha's last message to me, left the morning of the day she died. I'd been in a meeting and missed her call. "Hey, it's me," her voice said. So familiar it made my heart ache. "I need to talk to you about something important. Don't worry, it's nothing bad." A pause. "Actually, that's not true. It might be hard to hear, but we need to discuss it. I'll see you at dinner. I love you. Always remember that." I'd listened to this message 100 times after her death, clinging to her final, "I love you," but now I heard something else. Hesitation? Guilt, perhaps. Was this her preparing to tell me she was leaving? But if she'd been planning to leave me for Henry, why would she insist I remember she loved me? None of it made sense. Henry must be lying, or at least twisting the truth to hurt me. But why? What had I ever done to deserve such hatred from my own brother? I needed to find solid evidence, something beyond Henry's bitter words or my own anguished speculation. I needed the truth, however painful it might be. That's when I remembered. The pen drive. Years ago, after one of our arguments about her mother's estate, Martha had mentioned recording some of her thoughts, in case anything happened. I'd forgotten all about it until now. Where had she kept it? Her desk drawer? The small safe in our closet? I had to go home. Had to search. Had to know. The drive back the next morning was a blur. I barely noticed the brilliant fall foliage or the clear blue October sky. My mind was consumed with one purpose: finding that pen drive. Benny greeted me at the door with frantic joy, as if I'd been gone for weeks instead of overnight. I scratched behind his ears absently, heading straight for Martha's desk in the corner of our living room. I'd preserved it exactly as she'd left it, unable to bear clearing away her things. The drawer yielded nothing unusual: pens, notepads, paper clips. The small safe in our closet contained only jewelry and our passports. Where else would she have hidden something important? I sat on our bed, Benny curling up beside me, and tried to think like Martha. If she had recorded something she didn't want me to find until after she was gone, where would she put it? Then it hit me. Her recipe box. The one place she knew I'd never look. I wasn't much of a cook, and after her death, I'd survived on takeout and microwave meals. Her cherished wooden recipe box still sat on a kitchen shelf, untouched for 3 years. I rushed downstairs and pulled it down, fingers trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside, behind the alphabetized recipe cards, was a small black pen drive. The thumb drive felt impossibly heavy in my palm, a tiny rectangle of plastic containing who knew what secrets. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart thundering in my chest like a trapped animal. Did I really want to know what was on it? What if Henry was right? What if Martha had recorded a confession, an admission that she'd been planning to leave me for my brother? No, I had to know. Whatever the cost to my sanity, to my memories. I owed Martha that much. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely plug the drive into my laptop. Benny sensed my anxiety and pressed his warm body against my leg as I sat at the kitchen table. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the backyard. The garden Martha had lovingly tended now overgrown with weeds, the bird feeder empty and forgotten. The drive contained a single audio file, dated 3 days before the accident. I stared at the icon, my cursor hovering over it. One click and everything might change. I took a deep breath and double-clicked. There was a moment of silence. Then Martha's voice filled the room. So real, so present that for a second I thought she was there with me. "James, if you're listening to this, something's happened to me." Her voice was steady but edged with tension. "I've been trying to find the right time to talk to you about this, but there never seems to be a good moment. And now I'm worried I've waited too long." I closed my eyes, letting her voice wash over me. God, how I'd missed that voice. "There's something you need to know about Henry," she continued. "Something unforgivable he did years ago. If anything happens to me, I need you to look into Rebecca's eyes and tell her everything." My eyes snapped open. This wasn't at all what I'd expected. It started when Rebecca was 5, when you were in the hospital with pneumonia. Henry offered to watch her for those few days, remember? I was so grateful, working full-time, visiting you, taking care of the house. I was exhausted. Her voice caught slightly and I could hear her take a steadying breath. "But when you came home, Rebecca started having nightmares. She became clingy, afraid to be alone. I thought it was just because you'd been away, but then she told me Uncle Henry had shown her scary movies when I was at work. Movies no child should ever see. I felt sick. Surely she couldn't mean..." I confronted him. He denied it at first, then admitted he'd accidentally left an adult video playing when he thought she was asleep. "I wanted to tell you immediately, but he begged me not to. Said it would destroy your relationship with him. Said it was an honest mistake." The room seemed to be spinning around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. I made him promise to get counseling. He swore he would. I thought it was an isolated incident, a horrible mistake. I convinced myself Rebecca was young enough that she wouldn't remember, that telling you would only hurt everyone involved. Her voice hardened with self-recrimination. "I was wrong, James. So terribly wrong. Last week I found out he never went to counseling. Worse, I discovered he's been working as a volunteer at the children's ward at Oak Ridge Medical Center. I won't let him have access to vulnerable children." I felt a cold rage building inside me. Henry, my own brother. All these years, Martha had carried this burden alone. I've made an appointment with Dr. Wexler. He's head of staff at Oak Ridge. I'm going to tell him everything. They need to remove Henry from the volunteer program immediately. And after that, I'm coming clean to you. About everything, including the DNA test. DNA test? My mind reeled. What DNA test? I had a strange feeling when I saw Rebecca's school photo this year. Something about her eyes, her jawline. It wasn't right. It wasn't you, James. It wasn't me. It was... God, I can barely say it. She looked like Henry. The room went completely silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. Martha's voice continued, trembling now. I needed to know for sure. So I had Dr. Wexler run a DNA test. He agreed to list me under my middle name, Laura, to keep it confidential. The results come tomorrow. And regardless of what they show, you deserve to know the truth. About the test. About my suspicions. About what Henry did all those years ago. She paused and I could hear her fighting back tears. If Henry somehow, I don't even know how it could have happened. I've been racking my brain, trying to remember if there was ever a time, but I can't imagine. I would never. Her voice broke entirely. After a moment, she composed herself. "I'm picking up the results tomorrow afternoon. Then I'm coming straight home to talk to you. Whatever they show, we'll face it together. I love you, James. No matter what, I love you. Please remember that." The recording ended, leaving me in a silence so profound it seemed to have physical weight. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The implications of what I'd just heard were too enormous, too horrifying to process all at once. Martha hadn't been planning to leave me for Henry. She'd been planning to expose him, and possibly to tell me something unthinkable about our daughter, but she never made it home with those test results. The accident happened first, or was it really an accident? The timing was too convenient. If Henry knew Martha was about to expose him, I opened my laptop browser and searched for Oak Ridge Medical Center Volunteer Program 2022. Several photos appeared, including one of a group of volunteers with hospital staff. And there, in the back row, was Henry, standing next to a smiling Dr. Wexler. My phone rang, startling me so badly I nearly knocked over my coffee mug. It was my lawyer returning my earlier call about Martha's medical records. "James, I've submitted the request, but there's something odd," he said. "According to their records, someone already requested and received copies of Martha's files 3 years ago, right after her death." "Who?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Her brother-in-law, Henry Harrington. He had some paperwork authorizing him to act on your behalf. Did you sign anything like that?" "No," I said, my voice barely audible. "Never." After ending the call, I sat motionless at the kitchen table, staring at the photo on my screen. Henry had accessed Martha's medical records immediately after her death. Had he been looking for the DNA test results? Had he found them? And if he had, if they showed what Martha suspected, what would he have done with that information? I thought of Rebecca's letter. "I hate you for what you never admitted." Had Henry somehow twisted the truth, making Rebecca believe I was the one who had done something unforgivable? I needed those test results. I needed to know if my daughter, the person I'd loved unconditionally for 28 years, was biologically mine. And if she wasn't, how had it happened? Had Martha had an affair with my brother? The very thought made me physically ill. Or was there a darker possibility? One so horrific I could barely bring myself to consider it. The October sunset painted my living room in shades of amber and gold as I sat in Martha's old armchair, Benny curled at my feet. On the coffee table before me lay the remnants of my investigation: Martha's audio recording on my laptop, printouts of Henry's volunteer work at the hospital, the prescription from Dr. Wexler. I'd spent the afternoon piecing it all together, and the picture that emerged was more disturbing than anything I could have imagined. If Martha's suspicions were correct, Henry had done something unthinkable during those few days he watched Rebecca, something that haunted me now with sickening clarity. Rebecca's sudden change in behavior afterward, her nightmares, her fear of being alone, and if the DNA test confirmed what Martha feared, I couldn't even complete the thought. The implications were too horrific. I needed to talk to Rebecca, not to defend myself, not to accuse Henry, but simply to understand what she believed, what he had told her. But every call went straight to voicemail, every text unanswered. As night fell, I made a decision. If I couldn't reach Rebecca directly, I would leave her something she couldn't ignore, the truth, in my own words, for her to view after I was gone. I picked up my phone and opened the camera app. For a moment, I stared at my own reflection on the screen, the lines around my eyes deeper than I remembered, my hair almost completely gray now. When had I gotten so old? When had the world become so complicated, so full of hidden horrors? I pressed record and began to speak, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Rebecca," I said, looking directly into the camera, "if you're watching this, I'm gone. I know that might not mean much to you right now. You made your feelings clear on my birthday." I paused, gathering my thoughts. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking the passing of seconds that could never be reclaimed. "I don't blame you for wishing me dead. I would probably feel the same in your position, believing what you believe. But there's something you need to know. Something your mother wanted to tell me, but never got the chance." I told her everything. About Martha's audio recording, about Henry's lies, about the DNA test Martha had ordered just before her death. I explained how Henry had accessed her medical records immediately afterward, how he had systematically poisoned Rebecca against me with a twisted version of the truth. "I don't know what the test results showed," I admitted. "I may never know, but your mother was going to tell me everything that day. She was coming home to me, Rebecca, not leaving me for Henry as he claimed." Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I needed to stay focused, to give her all the information clearly. "There's something else you should know," I continued. "When you were 5, I was hospitalized with pneumonia. Henry stayed with you while your mother worked. She later discovered he had exposed you to inappropriate content. She confronted him, made him promise to get counseling. She chose not to tell me, believing it was an isolated incident and wanting to protect our family." My voice cracked slightly, and I took a moment to steady myself. "She was wrong not to tell me. I would have protected you. I would have kept him away from you forever, but she thought she was doing the right thing. We all make mistakes, especially when we're trying to protect the people we love. Outside, a light rain began to fall, pattering against the windows like gentle fingertips. The sound was soothing, a counterpoint to the heaviness in my chest. I don't know what Henry told you about the night your mother died, but here's the truth. She had chest pains. I insisted on taking her to the hospital, despite her protests that it was just anxiety. We never made it. A truck ran a red light and hit us on her side of the car. I closed my eyes briefly, the memory still raw after all these years. I didn't kill your mother, Rebecca. I was trying to save her. But Henry needed someone to blame, and I was the perfect target. He used his grief and guilt to manipulate you, to turn you against me. I leaned closer to the camera, my face filling the frame. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking you to believe me. All I'm asking is that you consider the possibility that the story you've been told isn't the whole truth, that you've been used as a weapon in a battle that began long before you were born. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof. Benny stirred at my feet, whimpering slightly in his sleep. Even in dreams, he sensed my distress. I've changed my will, I said. Benny will still be the beneficiary of my life insurance policy. I'm not so petty as to use money to manipulate you, but I've set up a trust that will provide for his care for the rest of his life. The remainder of my estate will go to a foundation for victims of childhood trauma. I paused, considering my next words carefully. I don't know if you're my biological daughter, Rebecca. The truth is, it doesn't matter to me. I raised you. I loved you from the moment I first held you. Biology can't change that. Nothing can. A tear escaped despite my efforts, tracking slowly down my cheek. Your mother loved you too. So much. Her last act was trying to protect you from a truth she feared would destroy you. I hope someday you can forgive her for that. And maybe, if not me, at least forgive yourself for the anger you've carried. I reached toward the screen as if I could somehow touch her through time and space. Be happy, Rebecca. That's all I've ever wanted for you. And know that despite everything, I died loving you, as I've always loved you, as I always will. I ended the recording and sat back, emotionally drained. Outside, the rain had become a downpour, sheets of water cascading from the gutters. The weather matched my mood, a cleansing storm after years of drought. I set up an email to be delivered to Rebecca 1 week after my death, containing the video and copies of everything I'd discovered, not out of vengeance or to burden her with painful truths, but because she deserved to know, to make her own judgments based on all the facts, not just Henry's poisoned version. That night I slept better than I had in years. Benny's warm weight against my side, a reminder that I was not completely alone. Whatever happened next, I had done what I could to set the record straight. The rest was out of my hands. In the morning, I called my lawyer and instructed him to rewrite my will exactly as I described in the video. When he asked if I was sure, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. Yes, I said. It's time to put the past to rest. The Healing Paws Animal Shelter sat at the edge of town, a low-slung building of faded red brick with a sign that had seen better days. Rebecca Parker, she'd gone back to her maiden name after her divorce last year, pulled her car into the nearly empty parking lot and shut off the engine. For several minutes, she just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the entrance. It had been 3 months since her father's funeral, 3 months since the heart attack that took him in his sleep, peacefully, just 2 weeks shy of his 60th birthday. 3 months since she'd stood dry-eyed at the cemetery, watching his casket being lowered into the ground, feeling nothing but a hollow vindication. He hadn't made it to 60 just as she'd wished. Be careful what you wish for. The words had haunted her ever since, especially after receiving the email her father had programmed to be sent a week after his death. The video had shattered everything she thought she knew about her father, her mother, her Uncle Henry, about herself. She'd watched it 17 times now. Each viewing revealed new details. The tremor in his hands, the grief in his eyes, the love that still lingered in his voice despite everything she'd said, everything she'd done. After the third viewing, she'd called Uncle Henry, demanding answers. He'd laughed it off, called her father delusional in his final days. But there was something in his voice, a nervousness that hadn't been there before. When she pressed about the DNA test, he'd hung up. Her calls had gone unanswered ever since. After the 10th viewing, she'd tracked down Dr. Wexler in Florida. The retired physician had been reluctant to speak with her at first, citing patient confidentiality. But when she mentioned Henry and the volunteer program at the children's ward, his tone had changed. "Your mother was very concerned," he'd said carefully. "She requested the DNA test under her middle name for privacy. She was afraid of what the results might show." "And what did they show?" Rebecca had asked, her heart pounding. A long pause. "I never got to tell her. She died before I could share the results. And afterward, your uncle came with paperwork, claiming to be acting on your father's behalf. He took all her records. But you must remember," she'd pressed, Was Henry my biological father?" Another pause, longer this time. "No, Ms. Parker, he was not. Your father, James Harrington, was your biological father. The test confirmed it with 99.9% certainty." The relief had been so overwhelming she'd sunk to her knees, the phone clutched to her ear, sobbing uncontrollably. "There's something else you should know," Dr. Wexler had added gently. "Your mother was also concerned about your uncle's access to children at our hospital. She came to me with some disturbing allegations about his behavior during a time he cared for you as a child." "What kind of allegations?" she'd asked, though deep down she already knew. Fragments of memories, nightmares she'd had for years, suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. Now, sitting in the parking lot of Healing Paws, Rebecca finally found the courage to reach for the door handle. Her father's will had been clear. Benny, his aging golden retriever, was to be taken to this specific shelter after his death. A trust had been established for the dog's care, with the stipulation that whoever adopted him would receive a generous stipend for his remaining years. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as she entered. The reception area was clean but sparse. A desk, a few chairs, posters of happy adoptions on the walls. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here about Benny," Rebecca said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Benny Harrington, my father's dog." Recognition dawned on the woman's face. "Oh, you must be Rebecca. I'm Diana, the director." She stood and extended her hand. "Your father made quite an impression on us. Such a thoughtful man to make such careful arrangements for his friend." Rebecca felt a lump forming in her throat. Is Benny still here?" Diana smiled. "He is. We've had several inquiries about him. That trust makes him quite the catch. But we've been following your father's instructions to wait at least 3 months before placing him." "May I see him?" Rebecca asked. Diana led her through a door into a large room lined with kennels. Most contained dogs of various sizes and breeds, but at the far end was a separate area, a small, comfortable room with a doggy bed, toys, and a large picture window overlooking a fenced yard. Inside, an elderly golden retriever dozed in a patch of sunlight. His muzzle was completely white now, his eyes cloudy with cataracts. At the sound of the door opening, he raised his head, ears perking up hopefully. "He does this every time someone enters," Diana explained softly. "I think he's always hoping it's your father." The simple observation broke something loose in Rebecca's chest. She knelt beside the old dog, who sniffed her hand cautiously, then with growing excitement. Did he recognize her scent? Remember her from the occasional visits she'd made to her father's house over the years? "Hi, Benny," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Remember me?" To her surprise, the dog struggled to his feet and pressed his entire body against her, trembling with joy, making soft whimpering sounds, as if he'd been waiting for her all this time. Diana watched from the doorway. "He's never responded to anyone like that," she said. "Not even the volunteers who walk him daily." Rebecca buried her face in Benny's soft fur, inhaling his doggy scent, feeling his heart beating against her own. "I'd like to adopt him," she said without looking up. "I know there's a whole process, but in this case there isn't," Diana interrupted gently. "Your father's instructions were very specific. If you came for Benny within 6 months, he was to go home with you immediately. No questions asked." Rebecca looked up in surprise. "He knew I'd come?" Diana smiled. "He hoped you would. He left something else for you too." She disappeared briefly, returning with a small wooden box. "He asked that this be kept with Benny's things to be given to you if you came." Rebecca took the box with trembling hands. It was simple, unadorned except for her initials carved into the lid. Inside was a small silver urn, no bigger than her palm, with a note attached. "A piece of me to keep close if you choose. The rest is with your mother, as it should be." Love, Dad. Tears spilled down her cheeks, unchecked and unashamed. All these months, she'd been carrying her father's video on her phone, unable to delete it but too afraid to show it to anyone else. Too afraid to admit she might have been wrong, that the poison she'd carried for years had been fed to her by the very person who had hurt her most. "There's one more thing," Diana said, reaching into her pocket. "Your father made a donation to our shelter in your mother's name shortly before he died. He requested that we use it to build a special area for senior dogs, those least likely to be adopted but most in need of love in their final years." She handed Rebecca a small framed photo of the shelter's new wing, with a plaque reading, "The Martha Harrington Memorial Senior Center." "He never stopped loving her," Rebecca whispered, more to herself than to Diana. "Despite everything, he never stopped loving either of us." Benny pressed his nose into her hand, his brown eyes gazing up at her with complete trust and adoration, the same way he must have looked at her father during those lonely years when she had abandoned him. "Come on, Benny," she said, wiping her tears. "Let's go home." As they walked out to her car, Benny limping slightly but keeping pace, Rebecca felt something shift inside her, a knot of anger and bitterness slowly unraveling. She couldn't change the past, couldn't take back the cruel words she'd said on her father's final birthday, couldn't undo the years of estrangement based on her uncle's lies. But she could choose what happened next, could choose to believe her father's final message, could choose to forgive her mother, her father, herself. In the parking lot, she helped Benny into the back seat of her car, placing the wooden box carefully beside him. The old dog settled with a contented sigh, resting his head on his paws, watching her with trusting eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered to the empty air. "I'm so sorry." As if in response, Benny thumped his tail against the seat once, twice. Rebecca smiled through her tears, started the car and drove toward home, carrying her father's faithful companion and a small portion of his ashes, finally ready to face the truth that would set them all free. Sometimes the most devastating wounds come from those we love the most. James lost years with his daughter because of a poison dripped slowly into her ear by someone who should have protected them both. What would you have done in his place? Would you have fought harder to reach her? Or would you too have eventually surrendered to her hatred, changing your life insurance beneficiary as a final act of wounded pride? The greatest tragedy isn't that James died just shy of his 60th birthday, fulfilling Rebecca's cruel wish. It's that he died still carrying secrets that might have healed them both sooner, yet in his final act, leaving Benny for her to find, along with the truth, he offered not just forgiveness, but a path toward redemption. Sometimes the most powerful legacy we can leave isn't money or possessions, but the courage to face difficult truths and the grace to forgive those who've wronged us most deeply. If this story touched your heart, please follow our channel for more tales that explore the complicated bonds of family, the wounds we carry in silence, and the healing that can come even after great loss. Like, share, and tell us in the comments. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew about someone you loved? Some secrets are meant to be revealed, even if only after we're gone.